I think that the context for the election this time around was markedly different in some ways from the context 6 years ago. 6 years ago was a situation where the migrant crisis was still resonating very strongly. And far-right parties here, and indeed the right-wing positioning of the Conservative Party here, was very much something that was growing. Whereas right now, we have a situation, of course, marked by persistent inflation, by a conflict in Ukraine, which is very close to Austria. And so it would appear as though the desire for stability, which clearly van der Bellen represents, outweighed anger at the system, if we can call it that. And certainly the migrant crisis is something that in this election played second fiddle to van der Bellen's assertion that his hands are the steady ones in a time of crisis. And so it would appear that that was a pledge of his that resonated with a large number of Austrians.
I mean, Anthony, we know that the post of, presidential post, I should say, is largely ceremonial. Where does it, though, leave Austria's far right, the outcome of this vote?
Well, interestingly, although it would appear that Austrians have opted for stability this time around, and this was certainly an election devoid of sensation in the way that the election 6 years ago was, when, of course, the far-right candidate did extremely well with around 35% of the vote. Nonetheless, it's interesting to look at the age breakdown, because many of the voters who appear to have voted for van der Bellen this time around are elderly voters. In fact, if we were looking at the voters aged 30 or below, then van der Bellen would actually not have achieved the 50% required to avoid a runoff. So there's certainly a generational gap here in terms of going for stability over something new. And this was a varied field as well. There were candidates from outside the system, both on the right and on the left. In fact, one candidate who garnered roughly 8% of the vote, but almost 20% in under 30s, is running a one-man party called the Beer Party. So it's worth noting that there is a generational gap, and that the further down the generational scale we go, the less that argument of, hey, I have safe hands in a time of crisis appears to resonate. And that's equally true also, of course, for the far right. So although this is not a sensational result for the far right, on 18% or so projected, then nonetheless, having a strong showing. It's the second strongest showing ever of a far-right candidate in a presidential election. And of course, it also comes on the back of scandals that have plagued the far right. They had a coalition government with the Conservative People's Party of former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. There were corruption allegations. There were corruption allegations surrounding the former leader of the far right. And all of that, of course, has also hurt the party. So I think it's fair to say that while it is down somewhat, it's not out.